The Third Side of the Coin, brought to you by Excalibur Coaching and Consulting.
Welcome to part two.
I think the curiosity part, you're right, it's missing. And it's, just tying it into the human mental health, right? Or the ability to be in the growth mode is the it's driven by so much fear, or perhaps the attachment to the convenience, because we've always had it, so we're never going to lose it, mentality. And the fear that's being communicated to the entire society. I don't think it quite matters which country you live in. That's what kind of ties a lot of people together. The fear driven actions that really limits the curiosity. And some of the numbers that are being predicted by the experts, at least here in the US, I just started hearing in the last few days that they're saying that in addition to the COVID related deaths, there could be about 70,000 more, or whatever that number, basically half is going to be added to or attributed to the deaths based on mental illness, whether it's suicide and everything else. And how does curiosity, you think, how would that help if somebody stays curious, being limited with the possibilities of travel and everything else you're mentioning? Do you think there is a way to incorporate that so people don't get to that point?
Yeah, there's the traditional way and there's the new way. So the new way is obviously you can surf the web if you have access to digital access. So, we all tend to think that everyone has access to the web, but only I think the figures right now is only 40% of the world's population has access to the World Wide Web. So, okay, if we don't have that, then how do we explore? When I was growing up, we explored by playing. So play is an essential part of curiosity because that creates creativity in you. Now, as you grow older, you start asking questions, and that's, the curiosity of when you first ask, why is the sun hot? Why is the sun warm? Why is water wet? These sometimes don't have answers to it. I mean, you can give a scientific answer to it, but there's something greater behind that, of the why, of that curiosity. And that eventually leads you to seeking answers within yourself, of looking inwards, of introspection. So in all the great journals, you have what people call introspection, reflection, meditation, mindfulness, and leading from that is things like authenticity. you know it's such a large word, authenticity. What does it mean? You can't be authentic unless you know more about yourself, because otherwise you'd be keep reinventing yourself to look for a new you. But really, you're still you. There's no new you. It's just new. It's just a different way of expressing yourself. But if you keep changing yourself, then what is your own state of mind? It gets very confused. I'm not saying you shouldn't improve yourself. Improvement is a natural part of life. You stop improving when you die. But you know, looking at what is there to improve comes from interaction with people, but at the same time, being okay and accepting yourself is also the biggest improvement. I think what we haven't talked about enough in the world is what is failure? How do we deal with failure? And everything that we look around us is driven by the fear of failure because of that competitiveness. Now, what is that competitiveness that we're talking about? It's the fear of missing out. What is the fear of missing out? Oh, I don't know, and we keep going and pursuing whatever it is that we want to pursue. There's nothing wrong with that without ever looking back until something happens. And what the COVID pandemic has brought to this world is the biggest mass digital literacy program in the whole world, because everyone was pushed onto the digital platform unexpectedly, but also the biggest self-reflection literacy or self-literacy um, education or learning happening in this whole world, because all of a sudden you are put in a place where you have to start thinking about, well, what does it all mean now that the routine that I've been told is the right routine, or the routine I think is the right routine, isn't possible anymore, or at this stage.
There are two major groups really that have been affected in the entire pandemic situation or crisis situation that we are in. Those who got laid off, and then the leaders. Let's talk a little bit about those who got laid off. I'm not sure what your personal experiences are as far as being laid off. I do recall, many moons ago, I was affected by a layoff, working for a large global corporation. And was in the leadership team. And when we started closing down the US operations, I was one of those people who did get laid off. And nobody's prepared for that, even though, you can sense that, yes, it could happen to you, based on the plans and strategies that I was a part of building. But when it happens, it becomes quite a traumatic experience. What I know now, that experience of understanding the world and learning would have helped me probably cope with it better. I think it's about coping mechanisms that a lot of people might not understand, not know. So if you were to be approached, by somebody who got laid off, or perhaps you were already, what would you recommend them? Kind of the first thing to just get that fear, panic out of the way. What's next? Because it is that fear. Am I going to fail? Like, it's that fear of failure. Well, it's not necessarily true, right? But in the moment, you're not necessarily realizing that. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
it's there's if you put it into stages roughly, when you're laid off, first is that of betrayal, a sense of disbelief and betrayal, because anyone who's working, whether you were contributing aggressively or just making the bare minimum, you were still sacrificing your time for that organization or person, and to be asked to leave. Um, it's, I mean, no one likes that. I mean, it's human nature, because you feel that you've contributed or you're part of something bigger. And then when you're asked to leave, regardless of how long or short your tenure with, you committed yourself in good faith. So that it's breaking of trust. So that sense of betrayal will come up, and then your mind starts to get confused and clouded, and then anger comes up, because one, you know, a lot of reasons of anger comes up is really then for usually you see that it's the anger is where you feel that you were not recognized for the contribution that you were making, or that they didn't see your full potential. Now that anger, instead of allowing you to fume and dig yourself deeper into anger and betrayal, you look at that, and then you look at really what they didn't recognize you for is really your full potential, and turn that into a positive and start building on it. Then after betrayal comes fear, because, depending on how disciplined you are in saving or for a rainy day, it's a question of livelihood, you know, and you need to be practical on that, and from that of fear, it comes down to doubt and sadness. And that doubt and sadness is, am I good enough? Maybe really I wasn't that good, or will I be able to find another job in this situation, or something that pays equally to that? So a sense of doubt, a sense of validity, and a sense of value goes out the window. And that is a point where you need people to support you. You can't think yourself through it. because as you try to think yourself through it, you know, it just keeps going round in circles. You know, for obviously, like, you know, with Excalibur, your organization, you help people process it because you speak to them and then also allow them to write things down. So methodology in journaling, in speaking to other people that is outside of the situation can give you clarity. That's what they mean by soundboarding people, you know, or having a mentor. You know? And it is a process. It's not an easy process, but if it came up, it also allows you to really push the envelope for yourself to see where your limits are, and in fact, to also discover where your limitlessness are as well.
To hear more, go to part 3.